It's time for health, your super informative turmeric latte charged, ginseng powered, antioxidant rich natural health podcast with a little twist of lemon. And I'm your host, Greg Newson, naturopath, herbalist, and nutritionist. We're here today for the Vitality and Wellness Centre and sponsored by NatraVital Health Supplements. 100% pure active ingredients, no binders, fillers, or additives. G'day and welcome to Time for Health. In today's episode, we're going to cover all things digestion. Now, it might not sound very exciting, but once you understand that there's more to the digestive system than putting food in your mouth and waste out your bum, you'll start to appreciate that proper digestion can lead to long-term health, and an impaired digestive system, it can cause things like bloating, flatulence, diarrhea, constipation in the short term, but in the long term, it can contribute to more serious health conditions. It can be a causative factor, I should say, of chronic inflammation, which then can lead to things like dementia, Alzheimer's, even cancer. So having a proper digestive system, or looking after your digestive system, is paramount for your long-term health. Digestion starts the minute you put food in your mouth, or the second you put food in your mouth. What first happens is you start to chew your food. Once you chew your food, you start to denature it. You start to break down the bonds that keep it as a solid item. So that's very important. The second thing that happens is that when you produce saliva, in that saliva there is a digestive enzyme called amylase. Now that has a couple of effects, the saliva and the enzyme. First, amylase breaks down carbohydrates, which are found in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and any flour type product. Chewing our food is often underrated. Most people don't do it properly. We live in this fast-paced society where we go, I've got to get something in. I'm hungry. I've got to get something in my mouth. I'll quickly eat some food and I'll chuck it in my mouth and down, swallow it. It's done. But when that action puts a massive strain on the rest of the digestive system to break the food down. Now, have a think about it. When you eat some nuts, peanuts, almonds, Brazil nuts, whatever they are, how often do you see the nut in your stool? A day or two later. Same with corn. So that tells me straight away that food is not being broken down properly. When you buy, for example, peanut butter or almond spread or something like that, it's it's a paste. That's really what your teeth should be doing to your food. Now, there was a naturopath in Australia many years ago called Maurice Blackmore. He started Blackmore's, the supplement company, and he often said that you must chew your food 60 times. Now, I have tried to chew a mouthful of food 60 times. It's not easy. Even if you chew your food, say, 30 times or 20 times or 10 times, it's a lot better than 5. So the more chewing that we can do in our food, the more broken down that food becomes. And the more important that is for the stomach, because the action of chewing and the saliva tells the stomach that food's on the way. And so the stomach goes, oh, okay, food's on the way. I better get myself into gear and I better start producing various chemicals or acids to break the food down. So the longer the food's in the mouth, the more time the stomach has to get ready to be able to accommodate the influx of food. What the stomach produces is a variety of acids, enzymes, and chemicals that help to break the food down. So the most abundant substance in the stomach, or the gastric juices, is hydrochloric acid. It has multiple roles. One of the important roles of hydrochloric acid is to help to break the food down, and especially proteins. It helps to denature proteins. So if you imagine a piece of steak, after it has been chewed by the teeth or broken down in part by the teeth, the stomach acid starts to dissolve the bonds that keep the amino acids or the proteins in their present form, and then that makes it easier for the body to digest. The hydrochloric acid kills bacteria and parasites that come in to the stomach via the mouth. Have you ever wondered why that if a group of people are all eating the same food, but one or two people from that group then come down with food poisoning and the other people don't? Well, stomach acid, the strength of the more acidic your stomach acid is, so the strength of your hydrochloric acid will either allow the bacteria to pass into the body, causing problems, or it will kill it in its tracks. A common bacteria that causes a lot of problems within the stomach is Helicobacter pylori, also known as H. pylori. So it's a bacteria that they associate now with ulcers, but it lives in your stomach when the acid is not at adequate levels. So if your stomach doesn't have the right pH, the bacteria can thrive. So if your stomach pH was 2.5, that's good enough for the H. pylori to hang around and then cause your ulcers, and then can contribute to reflux and heartburn as well. The stomach also produces pepsinogen, which is a precursor to the enzyme called pepsin. Pepsin is another enzyme, is one of the most important enzymes to break down proteins. Well, pepsinogen can't do anything, but if your body has good levels of hydrochloric acid, the hydrochloric acid converts the pepsinogen to pepsin. So if we don't have we can see if we don't have good stomach acid or don't have good hydrochloric acid, we're going to have a lot of trouble breaking down protein. And that will then result in people either doing a lot of burping, because food ferments in the stomach, which then can exacerbate, it can push the stomach acid up, which can cause reflux and heartburn, and really bad rancid breath, or it can cause a lot of flatulence out the back end, or a combination of both. In addition, the stomach acid contains gastric lipase. Now, that's role is to break down fats. So anything fatty that you have, the gastric lipase in the stomach begins the process of breaking down the fat. Stomach acid also contains the enzyme amylase, but amylase is not produced in the stomach or by the stomach. It actually comes into the stomach through the saliva, through the action of chewing. So the more chewing you have, the more saliva you produce, the more amylase that is then brought down into the stomach. Remember, amylase breaks down your carbohydrates. So in the stomach, you're breaking down carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. One more thing that is produced by the stomach is a substance called intrinsic factor. Intrinsic factor plays a vital role in the absorption of B12. It's basically, if you can't produce intrinsic factor, you can't absorb B12. Hence, you'll need an injection all the time. So the greater levels of intrinsic factor, the more B12 your body can absorb. So as you can see, the stomach is just not a storage reservoir for food. It plays an essential role in keeping us healthy, because without proper stomach acid, we can't break the foods down effectively. If the foods are not broken down effectively, we can't absorb nutrients. No nutrients, ill health. I will go into a little later in the podcast some health conditions that low stomach acid can cause, and what you can do to improve the body's ability to produce more stomach acid or gastric juices. Once the food leaves the stomach, it passes into the small intestines. Once it's into the small intestines, it's quite acidic, which is not good because acid burns. In the stomach, there's a thick layer of mucus that separates the stomach juices, or the gastric juices and acids, from the lining of the stomach. If that mucus breaks down, then ulcers occur. So when it goes into the small intestines, we don't want to create duodenal ulcers, which is ulcers in the upper part of the small intestine. So to prevent this, the pancreas secretes a whole heap of digestive enzymes in a bicarbonate solution. So you've most probably heard of sodium bicarb, which is sodium bound to bicarbonate. Well, it's the bicarbonate that the pancreas produces, and it is quite alkaline. So once it combines with the acid in the intestines, that combination of acid and alkaline brings the pH to neutral or just above neutral, making the environment easier for the digestive enzymes secreted by the pancreas to effectively break the food down. So in the digestive juices, there is three main digestive enzymes. There's lipase. Lipase breaks down fat. similar to the gastric lipase. This is the pancreatic lipase. The gastric lipase works in an acid environment, whereas the pancreatic lipase works in a more slightly alkaline environment. Same with all the enzymes produced by the pancreas. So there's also amylase produced by the pancreas, breaks down carbohydrates, and protease, which is different to pepsin, but it still is the enzyme produced by the pancreas to break down proteins. Once these proteins or these foods, I should say, have been broken down further, they then become these like microscopic particles. And then these microscopic particles are absorbed through what we call the intestinal villi. So this villi is like finger-like projections that just like flow back and forth in the digestive juices, like some seaweed or coral that's just floating around in the ocean, and it's just picking up little bits of plankton and other nutrients to keep it healthy. Well, the villi do the same thing. So all these vitamins and minerals and amino acids and carbohydrates and fats and antioxidants, etc., are all broken down through the action of the stomach and the pancreatic enzymes, and then they're absorbed through these finger-like projections. An analogy I like to use for my patients when explaining the digestive process in like the stomach acid and the digestive enzymes is picture an old building that needs to be wrecked. And you've got this crane with this big wrecking ball, and the wrecking ball takes a big swing at a wall of the building, and that big building breaks down to big chunks of brick. That's what the stomach acid does to the food. From there, it goes into the small intestine, and all these little digestive enzymes, they kind of they're there just chewing away, like chew at these big chunks of brick, and they break that chunks of brick down to grains of sand. The grains of sand are then absorbed through the villi. Firstly, if the stomach acid was quite weak, that big wall would be in the stomach, so it wouldn't be broken down to chunks of bricks. So that wall is not going to be broken down effectively because A, we didn't chew the food, or B, because we don't have enough gastric juices, the hydrochloric acid, the pepsin, etc. Now, if that then passes into the small intestine, these little digestive enzymes that are like breaking down the bricks to grains of sand, they can't do, the job's just too big for them to break this big wall down. And so then that wall passes out of the body. So it passes out of the body full of nutrients, so you become malabsorbed, but it can also cause fermenting. So it can cause fermenting in the stomach, which is your bloating in the stomach, your reflux, your heartburn, your burping. It can cause bloating in the small intestine, which can also result in flatulence. And once it goes into the colon, it's just this big lump there, and then all the bacteria that are in the colon, they're looking at it and they're going, well, you're not supposed to be here. And then the bad bacteria and the harmful pathogens, if they're there, they will then to start fermenting that, which will create more gas, which can create constipation, which can create diarrhea, can create abdominal pain until it passes through. Now, I've mentioned the bloating and the gas and all that, but if we don't break the foods down, the eyeball that needed the antioxidants that are in, or the vitamin A that's in carrots that needs to improve your vision, doesn't get absorbed. The antioxidants that the liver needs to protect you from all the toxins that it has to detoxify don't get absorbed. The calcium for the bones doesn't get absorbed. The magnesium for the muscles doesn't get absorbed. All of a sudden, you start to get these other signs and symptoms. Your body starts to say, hey, I haven't got enough magnesium. I'm going to cause cramps. Or I don't have enough calcium. I'm going to get brittle bones. Or I don't have enough B1. I'm going to get dementia, or I'm going to have fatigue if I don't have enough B3. So proper digestion is essential, not just to make you full. Its role is to nourish every single cell within your body. And if those cells don't get the correct food, they wither, they die, they mutate. Hence disease, or if we slow that word down, dis-ease within the body. After my little digression once again, I better get back on track, and we're going to look at the colon. Now, the colon's about 1.5 meters long. I didn't mention the length of the small intestine. I always find this interesting. It's around 2.7 to 4.8 meters long, and the reason for the difference in the length, it basically depends on how tall you are. So the taller you are, the longer the small intestine. So most people would think of the colon as the reservoir for the poo. And I suppose it is to a degree. because once the food has left the small intestine, it's like a big slurry. It's just all the nutrients are taken out, and what's left is fibers and undigestible parts of the food, plus the metabolic byproducts, poisons, spent hormones, broken down immune cells, cholesterol, all of those things that the liver has dumped into the small intestine to be eliminated from the body. Our colon is a great recycler. All that liquid that is passed into it from the small intestine, most of that liquid gets reabsorbed back in the body to keep the body hydrated. As that liquid is absorbed, the stool takes form. It becomes more like a ripe firm banana. That's the ideal poo. We'll get to different types of poo later on. And then there's a little bit of liquid still there, so it gives it a bit of lubrication so it can pass through the intestines. The intestinal wall in the colon is made up of these muscular structures, and one muscular structure contracts, which then pushes the feces from that chamber into the next chamber. It contracts, pushes it from next chamber to the next chamber. So it does that for 1.5 meters or thereabouts until it gets down to the sigmoid colon, where it stores the poo ready for an evacuation a couple of times a day. If you don't drink enough water, your body goes, I'm dehydrated. It sends a message to the colon, take as much liquid as you possibly can. We need to survive. Without this liquid, we're dead. We're just going to be a withered old prune. So, dehydration, I digress here for a second. Side effects of dehydration: irritability, fatigue, headaches, obviously the dryness of the skin. So if a patient comes to me and says, oh, look, I've got constipation, the first thing I do before any supplement is say, how much water do you drink? Oh, just a cup. I said, well, go home, drink 2 litres of water. And you'll be piddling a lot, but let's see what happens. And it's like... It's like I can perform miracles. I'm Harry Potter or something like that, because they go, oh my God, I go to the toilet. I haven't been to the toilet for a week, and now I'm going every day. This is fantastic. Well, it's because your body needs liquid to lubricate the stool, but it needs to be hydrated so we're not stealing it all. So moral of the story here is, if you're constipated, drink some water. FYI, coffee, alcohol, cola type drinks, caffeine, they are diuretics, so that will cause your body to eliminate or piddle out more water than it wants to, and that will then cause dehydration. In addition to reabsorbing the water from the stool, your colon plays home to an organ called the microbiome. It's basically 2 kilos of bacteria and other organisms that keep you alive. Interestingly, couple of years ago, maybe 20 years ago, when they mapped the human genome, they were quite surprised once they got all the genes and they sequenced everything and they had a look at everything that was within the body. They found that 98% of the genes, the DNA that they found, were not human. They were of alien origin. Doesn't mean they're alien from outer space, but it meant that they were not human. So what they found they were was this conglomerate of beneficial bacteria, viruses, and specialized fungi. Not only did they find these organisms within the gut, within the colon, they actually found them all over the skin, which is your body's first line of defense. They found them in all the mucous membranes. That'd be the nose, the mouth, the anus, the vagina, anywhere where, I suppose, outside substances can come into the body. They were there as a first line of defense to protect you from an alien invasion. Well, maybe not an alien invasion, but an invasion of harmful organisms. When we eat food like fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds and whole grains and legumes and pulses and beans, basically foods that contain fibre, they are not absorbed through the small intestine. They come into the colon and they then work their mode of action there. So there's an insoluble fibre which acts like a broom in the colon, so it sweeps out all the debris and it adds bulk to the stool. Good sources of insoluble fibre are fruit and vegetable skins, rice bran, wheat bran, psyllium, nuts and seeds. There's also an insoluble fiber that acts like, or that forms like a gel, and that binds to chemicals that the body wants to eliminate, such as excess cholesterol, spent estrogens or estrogen to excess estrogens, heavy metals, and those sort of things. And it traps them in that gel, and it helps eliminate them through when you go to the toilet. Good sources of soluble fibre are fruits and vegetables, things like psyllium hulls, flaxseed, slippery elm, pectin, and marshmallow. Now, I don't mean marshmallow, the pink and white fluffy things. I mean the herb marshmallow root. Now, you've most probably heard of probiotics, and they're specialised bacteria, namely Lactobacillus acidophilus and the Bifidobacterium species, and they energise the health of the gut bacteria. But they only really hang around in the gut for about 4 to 6 weeks, whereas prebiotics are specialised fibres found in a variety of fruits and vegetables that provide food and nourishment not just for one or two species of bacteria, but for the whole lot. So if you in the gut, they've discovered about 1,000 species of beneficial gut organisms, gut bacteria, and within those species there is subspecies. So you've got hundreds of millions, so you've got 2 kilo of bacteria, and you know how small a bacteria is. So, you got millions and billions or trillions. Actually, they say that there is more bacteria in the gut than there are cells in the body, and there's trillions of cells in the body. Now, these bacteria live on one food and one food group only, and that is prebiotic fibers. Now, there's certain types of prebiotic fibers. I'll talk about them a little later, but if your body is not receiving enough of these prebiotic fibers, that means the microbiome, this 2 kilo of bacteria that I'm talking about, they get sick, they wither and die. Well, that is bad news for you, because the bacteria in your gut live in a symbiotic relationship with you. When they get sick, you get sick. When you get sick, they get sick. When they die, you're dead. Now, we know that this microbiome it makes up around 70% of the body's immune system, and that immune system lives within the gut. But they also help to regulate our moods and our brain chemicals such as serotonin and GABA and dopamine. They control inflammation. They regulate the autoimmune response within the body. That's where your body is attacking you. They are also the chief regulators of our allergenic response. So, and then they link to a whole heap of other things like cardiovascular disease, all of your autoimmune diseases like type 1 diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis. They all have a basis of a faulty microbiome. So if you want a healthy microbiome, which then means a healthy you, let's look at increasing more prebiotic fibers into the body. Now, what these prebiotic fibers do, there is bacteria there's organisms in the body, in the gut, called commensal bacteria. So they're neither good nor bad. If there's too many of them, they're bad. But if there's at normal levels, they're not an issue. What they do is they actually eat the prebiotic fibers, and then they poop out a chemical called a short-chain fatty acid. Now, there's a few short-chain fatty acids. Butyrate is the most common short-chain fatty acid for the gut. What that butyrate does is it does what Jesus Christ did on the mountain and feed the masses with the loaves and fishes. So it feeds it's the fuel source for every single organism in that microbiome. And not only does it do that, but within the cells of the colon wall, they're called colonocytes. They get 80% of their food from what you eat and 20% from the blood supply. And in the small intestine, it's about 50-50. Now, they only eat short-chain fatty acids. So if you're not having enough fiber or prebiotic fibers in your diet, those colonocytes wither and die. Now, if those colonocytes wither and die, or they get sick, or they get unhealthy, what disease do you think you're going to be more prone to? Okay, tick, 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 think. You will be more prone to the number one cancer killer in the world, which is colon cancer. Bowel polyps will be quite common. I've forgotten the name of the condition. Hang on a second. Diverticulitis. Okay, that is the pockets where basically the colon gets really weak, and the structure of the colon, it loses its strength, like its little steel rods have disappeared that's keeping it all together, and it produces balloons in the gut wall, so they poke outwards, and then people that then can eat certain foods, and that will get trapped in that pocket and then cause inflammation, which causes a lot of pain. So that is a weakening of the intestinal wall. So good health, good probiotic intake. The good gut bacteria, the microbiome, they also play a very important role. So far I've told you a lot of important roles they play, but they actually help to nourish us. When the conditions are right and they feel healthy, they actually produce vitamins. They produce things like vitamin B12, folate, B6, B2, B3, K2, vitamin K2, biotin, choline, and quite a few others. So not only do they keep our immune system and our gut strong, but they're also now our little multivitamin. Gotta love them. I mentioned earlier that the liver is also a component or a part of the digestive system. And you're most probably thinking, the liver, doesn't that just detoxify the body? And when I drink too much alcohol, it gets a little bit of a caning. Well, yes, it does. But it's also involved in over 10,000 different chemical reactions. Now, when we look at digestion, it plays a really, really important role in breaking down fat. Now, I know I mentioned that we've got the lipase, the gastric lipase and the pancreatic lipase, and they do break down fat, but the liver produces a chemical called bile, and it breaks down and enhances the absorption of fat into the bloodstream. It also helps the absorption of the fat-soluble vitamins, which are vitamin A, E, D, and K. Now, we're about to go into another digressive moment, so bear with me. Now, picture, get a glass of water and get some olive oil and pour olive oil on the top, or pour olive oil on the water. The oil sits on top of the water. Now, the role of the bile in the body is to break that layer of oil down to trillions of microscopic particles. And then those microscopic particles easily diffuse through the intestinal villi and go into the bloodstream, where they're used as energy and transporters for vitamins, etc. If you have had a fatty meal or a bag of hot chips or a plate of hot chips or something oily and you feel like yuck, you think, I don't feel too well, I feel a bit nauseous, I feel a bit queasy, just unwell, that is a classic indication that your liver is not producing enough bile. The good news is there are some fantastic herbs to stimulate bile flow and bile production. So I'll discuss them a little bit later on in the podcast. So you have to stay tuned and focused and listening to my dull, droning voice. So yeah, anyway, towards the end. In addition to breaking down fats, bile also acts as the agent that the liver uses to remove toxins. And it dumps those toxins then into the intestinal tract, through the bile duct into the intestinal tract, and they are then removed out through the feces when you go to the toilet. Bile also acts as a laxative and helping to relieve constipation. Over the years, when people have come to see me and they're suffering anxiety or stress or panic, worry, that sort of stuff, I'll look at their diet and I go, oh, you're drinking coffee, are you? Oh, yeah, I love my morning coffee. Got to have my coffee. I say, well, that may have to go. Well, it not may have to go. It will have to go, because what it's doing is it's causing a spike in your adrenaline, which is then causing an increase in cortisol, which is then causing your anxiety, your panic, your worry, your stress to get, exacerbated. So we've got to get rid of it. And they go, oh, no, please. I can't do that. If I do that, I won't be regular. Now, I won't be able to go to the toilet. So what's happening there is that the human body doesn't actually know whether caffeine is beneficial or it's toxic. So it upregulates our P450 enzyme detoxification pathways, and it stimulates that whole process. Now, the liver's very heavily involved in this. So it gets rid of the caffeine from the body, and it does that by dumping it into a whole heap of bile. So you get a lot more bile dumped, and that bile then goes into the intestines, acts as a laxative, everything slides on through. So when they stop the coffee, they get a little bit constipated. Now, that's actually showing the underlying health of the intestinal or the digestive tract. So it might not be as healthy as they think it is, because they are taking something to stimulate bowel motions. Yep, digressed again. Sorry about that. The last digestive organ that we need to have a bit of a chat about is the pancreas. Now, I've already mentioned that the pancreas is quite involved in releasing bicarbonate into the intestinal tract to dilute the stomach acid, so we can have proper digestion within the small intestine. It also produces the digestive enzymes. Slow down, Greg, get the words out. Amylase, lipase, and protease. So it also produces a group of hormones that, unlike the digestive enzymes that are released into the digestive tract or into the intestines, the hormones are released into the bloodstream. Now, one common one that most people would have heard about is insulin. Now, the role of insulin is to lower elevated blood sugar levels. And it does this by grabbing hold of a glucose molecule. So when your blood glucose levels rise, there's a message sent to your pancreas, blood glucose levels rising, no good for us, can cause cancer, diabetes, gangrene, so we need to get rid of it. And so what it does, it secretes the insulin. The insulin comes hold and grabs hold of the glucose molecule. The glucose and the insulin go to a cell, they knock on the cell's door, and the cell goes, oh, beauty, Meals on Wheels. In it goes, it eats that glucose molecule, blood glucose levels decrease. Another hormone that it secretes into the bloodstream is glucagon, and that is released when our blood sugar levels get too low. And then when that's released, it tells the liver, so the liver is another job of the liver, is it stores sugar. It stores glucose in the form of glycogen. So the pancreas, the hormone glucagon, it says to the liver, okay, mate, I need some glucose. And the liver goes, oh, sure, right, here you go. And it turns the glycogen into glucose, and our blood glucose levels rise. It also secretes gastrin that helps the stomach produce more gastric juices or gastric acids, and amylin that helps control appetite and the emptying of our stomach. I almost got away with it, but I've forgotten to mention the gallbladder. We all often forget the gallbladder unless we suffer from gallstones. Now, the liver generally produces per day around 800 to 1,000 mil of bile all day. And when you're having a fatty meal, it's fed directly into the small intestine to break the fats down. Between meals, while the liver is still producing small amounts of bile, it puts it into the gallbladder, which only holds about 80 mil, and then that is utilised when you next eat, and then that bile is then pumped into the small intestines. So it's like a bit of an overflow gland, if you want to call that, an overflow organ for excess bile production by the liver. The Chinese have a different look at the role of the gallbladder. It's a yang organ, so yang is a stimulating organ, yin is a more suppressed organ, but it keeps the balance between the liver and the gallbladder. So it allows the liver's energy, its qi, to be able to be dispersed throughout the body, which is quite important. So now we have a good understanding of what the relevant organs in the digestive system do and the roles they play. What are the symptoms that tell us that we've got poor digestion? Thankfully, the body's always talking to us and letting us know what's going on. We just have to learn to listen to the language of the body. So, signs that the digestive system might not be up to speed and up to scratch and as healthy as it should be is things like bloating, abdominal bloating, gas, flatulence, reflux, heartburn, tired after eating a meal, a sour metallic taste in your mouth, smelly poo, smelly gas, undigested food in your stool, burping, belching, bad breath, BO, indigestion that can last 2 to 4 hours after eating, abdominal cramps, aching, that colicky type pain, rumbling in the tummy, constant hunger, and even postnasal drip. Another way of knowing if the digestive system isn't up to speed, you might not have any of those symptoms, but your stool, it should look like a ripe, firm banana. And if it's anything else but that, if it's dry and pebbly, obviously the body's reabsorbing a lot of water, so dehydration. If it's loose, if it's semi-solid, if it's like a soft serve ice cream, it could be like chocolate mousse consistency. You'll never eat these foods again. It could be explosive. They're all classic signs that the digestive system isn't working effectively. Another way of knowing how healthy the digestive system is the colour of the poo. So if the stool is brown, that's good, that's normal. If it's a light colour, it can indicate lack of bile, lack of pancreatic enzymes, and it can also indicate liver disease. If it's yellow, it can indicate a bit of fat in the stool and there's malabsorption going on. Green can be excessive bile, can be diarrhea, so it's passing through the digestive tract too quickly. If it's bright red, obviously you may have some hemorrhoids or you've eaten a lot of beetroot, one of the two. If it's black, that's the big warning sign, that's the big red flag. That can mean bleeding in the upper gastrointestinal tract. So that's straight away, go to the doctors and get yourself checked out. So if you're listening to this at the moment and you've got black poo and you're not eating truckloads of licorice, the lolly licorice, not the herb, or you're not taking an iron supplement, go see a GP, get yourself checked out. These are the common signs that indicate that the digestive system or the health of the digestive system isn't as robust as it should be and something needs to be done for your long-term health. But there is other conditions that you may not have any of these digestive disorders like the stool or the poo formation or the bloating, gas, etc. But you may suffer from things like mental health problems, anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, or you may have an autoimmune disorder, whether it be type 1 diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, Hashimoto's disease. They all have a basis. They all start in the gut, and it's the microbiome in the gut that plays a major role in autoimmune disorders. Allergies can also indicate poor digestive health. Again, the immune system lives within the gut, crappy immune system. Most inflammatory disorders again have a basis within the gut, whether that's arthritis, whether that's cardiovascular disease, even cancer. So it makes a lot of sense to keep that digestive system healthy, not just for the bloating, the gas, the constipation, but for our long-term health, because when we put food into our mouth, the quality of the food obviously is going to dictate the health of the human. But if the ability of the digestive system to absorb the nutrients effectively from the food is diminished, or its ability to eliminate toxins and byproducts and rubbish from the body effectively, then every single cell in the body is going to suffer because the cells themselves within the body become malnourished. The cells of the liver become malnourished. The cells of the spleen, the brain, the kidneys, the liver, the kneecap, the cartilage, everything starts to break down. Also, if the body can't eliminate through the colon waste effectively, then there's a build-up of toxic residue, things become sluggish, there's more chemicals stored in the body can't eliminate, then there becomes a breeding ground for pathogens and harmful organisms, and then cells go, you know what, I'm not living in a healthy environment, I'm going to become bad, and they start to mutate. Once they mutate, then they can cause all sorts of immunological disorders, including cancer, dementia, Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis, any autoimmune disease, recurring infections, colds and flus. The list is endless. Our long-term health, our longevity, and how well we age is all dependent on numerous things, but predominantly the health and robustness of our digestive system, the health of our immune system, which lives in the digestive system. That's its home, the gut, the intestines, and what we eat, which feeds both the digestive system and the immune system. So let's look at the causes of poor digestion. Now, there are many, and I'm not going to touch on them all. If I do, I'll put another 4.5 hours on the podcast, which you'll have most probably thrown out the window by then, having to listen to me. So let's just focus on the major ones, and a lot of the ones that we can do to make changes to improve our digestive system. So the number one thing to help improve digestive system or prevent the weakening of the digestive system is the foods we eat. If your diet consists predominantly of a lot of white stuff, so white flour, white bread, white rice, then your body is being robbed of essential nutrients that it needs to A, stimulate the whole digestive process, and B, maintain long-term health of everything else downstream. Let me explain. When you eat something that's white, It means that it has been refined. For example, white rice does not exist in nature. It initially starts off as brown rice, and then man comes along and thinks, how can I make a bit more money out of that? And what it does, it polishes it up and it takes away the husk and the hulls and everything brown and turns it into white. But doing so, it eliminates about 32 different vitamins and minerals. So brown rice is basically a powerhouse of food. It is a multivitamin. Now, let's say you eat that brown rice and it goes down into the digestive system, and there's some B1 in the brown rice, there's some chromium, there's some magnesium, and everything's going well, and that helps stimulate digestion because your body needs those nutrients to break down carbohydrates, and everything's going well, and all the workers are happy, and everything's going on. The foreman's quite impressed because he's going, oh, this is good, I've got good production going on today, no days without, injuries and no days of sickness, this is fantastic. But then all of a sudden you decide, bugger this, I'm not eating this stuff anymore. I'm just going to get lazy and I'm going to eat white rice and then white bread. And I'm going to have some donuts and cakes and biscuits all made on white flour. Okay, so the body goes, well, in comes this whole influx of white rice, and the body goes, well, okay, we need to break this down. There's none of these, there's no B1, there's no magnesium, there's no chromium. Okay, well, we need some. So the foreman says to Jack, he says, hey, Jack, go up to the storeman and requisition some of these vitamins and minerals. And so up goes Jack, goes the storeman. He says, hey, Pete, how you going? Can I have these? And Pete says, yep, no worries. And he hands them over, and then he comes back and it puts it all those vitamins go into the digestive factory, and it breaks down the rice. But this happens over a period of time, and then one day the foreman says to Jack, hey, mate, off you go. Need some magnesium, B1 and chromium. And Jack runs off to Pete, and Pete says, mate, I ain't got any. And he goes, what? He said, I need it. And he said, well, I haven't got any. And he said, well, Paul, the boss, he's in a bad mood. He's really irritated today. I ain't going back and telling him that. I'll get a kick in the bum and I'll most probably get fired. And he says, well, what can I do? And Pete says, well, go speak to the brain. That's got a bit of B1. Go see if you can borrow some from that and get some magnesium from the bones and some chromium from the pancreas. And he goes, okay. So he goes off and asks those organs and body parts for that. And they say, no, go away. We need them. We need them to function. And he goes, I ain't going back to the office or the factory without these vitamins and minerals. And he goes, I'll steal them. So he robs a bit from the bones and a bit from the pancreas and a bit from the brain and goes back and keeps the digestive process going along. Now, he does that every day for 1, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. But then things start to happen. The bones go, where's my magnesium? I haven't got any. Well, then it starts to develop osteoporosis, and the bones become brittle. And then the pancreas goes, where's my chromium? I haven't got any. Then type 2 diabetes occurs. And the brain goes, where's my B1? I haven't got any. Then dementia occurs. So from that little story, I know I've digressed a little bit there, but anyway, from that story, you've got to understand that we need to nourish ourselves. Like white flour products, they might taste fantastic. And I don't like the taste of brown rice. It's too chewy, it's too nutty. Get over it. You've got to have these healthy foods. You've got to have these foods that are found in nature to nourish the body. Sure, you can go take a multivitamin that contains all of these, vitamins and minerals, but doing so, you miss out on all of the other phytonutrients that are found within that food, all the antioxidants, all the other things that they can't put into a tablet. Plus, there is the vibrational energy found in a living food, which can't be replicated in a tablet. Be honest and ask yourself, is the foods I'm eating, are they really nourishing, life-giving foods? Are they foods found in nature? Or are they foods that have been adulterated by man? For example, brown rice found in nature, white rice adulterated by man. Or are my foods, or is my diet, I should say, quite heavy on pre-made, pre-packaged, takeaway type foods, whether it be lots of sweets and lollies and chocolates, or whether it's pre-made cakes and biscuits, or whether it's pre-made meals and breakfast cereals and things along those lines. If your diet's heavy in those, you are doing yourself more harm than good. And you will eventually have problems, maybe not today or tomorrow, but in 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years' time. There is a saying, you are what you eat, so just be careful of what you eat. And also remember that the things that you do today, the decisions that you make today, will either have a beneficial or a negative effect on you in the future. For example, if you eat a lot of plastic cheese hamburgers and drink a lot of black cola drinks, you are more inclined to be predisposed to heart disease, diabetes, obesity, and cancer. Whereas if you eat a lot more food found in nature, fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, legumes, pulses and beans, etc., you are more prone, well, prone's not the right word, you're more inclined to live a life with less disease, less heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and obesity. So this week, number one on the hit parade to get your digestive health back on track is diet, a healthy, natural, nature-based diet. While I'm talking about that, just be mindful that marketing is always great in getting people to purchase what they want them to purchase. Just be mindful. There's a lot of these synthetic meats around at the moment where they've turned plant-based things into to look and taste like meat. It's just look at the ingredients. Just look at the ingredients, and hydrolyze this or XYZ name that you can't pronounce on the label. They're synthetic. They're not natural. Even though they say they're plant-based, avoid them like a plague. The second most common cause of poor digestive health, believe it or not, is pharmaceutical medication. So certain medical drugs damage the lining of the gut, they destroy the function of the stomach, they inhibit the promotion or production of beneficial gut flora, the microbiome, they damage that. So there is a few main ones that I will mention. If we look at the stomach, there is a class of drug called protein pump inhibitors that inhibits the body or reduces the stomach's ability to produce stomach acid, the gastric juices. These class of drugs are commonly sold under the names of Nexium, Somac, and Pariet. And they are given to people that go to the doctors and complain about reflux or heartburn. There is a common misconception that the reflux and heartburn is caused by excess stomach acid, so the stomach's producing too much stomach acid, where in reality it is the opposite. There is not enough stomach acid and the food goes into the stomach and it ferments. For example, if you grab a piece of chicken, put it in a Ziploc bag and throw it in the sun for a couple of hours, gases will start to build up inside that bag and the bag will expand. The same thing happens in the stomach. If you don't have enough stomach acid, remember I spoke about the building that needed to be wrecked and that we need to break the wall down to big chunks of brick. If the stomach acid can't break that food down, it sits in the stomach and it ferments and gases are produced. Now, the gases are either going to go down through the digestive tract and make a large sound on the trumpet out the back end, or they're going to come back up through the digestive tract and you'll get a lot of burping, and then with that, if you get a lot of burping, you can cause the stomach acid to push back up through the esophagus and cause that reflux burning type pain that people often complain about. So there's two things with that. Obviously, we need to increase the stomach acid. The stomach needs to be able to produce more, and we'll get to that a little later on, how it can do that. And there is the sphincter valve. So there's a valve that closes once at the end of between the esophagus and stomach. So food comes down and it opens and then it all goes into the stomach, and once it's in the stomach, it closes and then prevents any of the acid from washing back up through the esophagus. Now, that sphincter valve can get a bit lazy, and then that can also cause reflux. So that needs to be addressed as well. Some of the side effects with the protein pump inhibitor medication is they say you're not supposed to be on them for more than 2 years. Why? Well, they've actually shown that they dramatically increase the risk of all cancers. How? Why? Well, slow down. Let me explain. Don't freak out. The stomach acid, as I said, we need to have good levels of stomach acid, and good levels of stomach acid allows us to break down and absorb food and the nutrients from that food. Low levels of stomach acid means that the body gets robbed or is robbed of some very important vitamins and minerals. Zinc, which is the commander-in-chief of the immune system, so it controls and orchestrates the whole immune system. It's also one of the primary nutrients needed to make stomach acid. So low zinc, low stomach acid. Unfortunately, protein pump inhibitors keep you in a never-ending loop of low stomach acid, low zinc, low zinc, low stomach acid, low stomach acid, low zinc. Around and around and around you go. Where it stops, nobody knows. Yeah, sorry about that. Protein pump inhibitors also inhibit iron. Now, iron, as people know, is for energy, but iron is actually very important in cell death. Iron is the mineral that flicks the switch that causes a cancerous cell to die. Magnesium, essential for immune health and the health of the microbiome. Low stomach acid also inhibits calcium, vitamin D, which is the 2IC of the immune system, along with vitamin C. So vitamin D and vitamin C are not absorbed effectively. If you have low levels of vitamin C, your body cannot absorb folate properly, which is vitamin B9. Now, low levels of folate cause cells to mutate, the DNA in the cells to mutate. Low levels of stomach acid also inhibit the absorption of pretty much all of your B vitamins. I've just mentioned earlier on the intrinsic factor. So low intrinsic factor, low stomach acid, you don't absorb B12, you don't absorb B1, B2, B3, B5, B6, and the list just goes on. Interestingly, along with zinc, vitamin B1, B6, and B3 are needed to manufacture stomach acid. So that's why those protein pump inhibitors are linked to cancer, because we're causing malnourishment. Now, people are going to say, "Oh, it helps me because if I don't take them, I get my reflux." And yes, that is true. But you're actually putting a Band-Aid on a festering sore. You're not actually treating the underlying problem. And the underlying problem is that your stomach is not producing adequate amounts of gastric juices. So the food ferments, you get reflux. Or the sphincter valve is damaged, or there is something like H. pylori, which we mentioned earlier on, living in the stomach, which then worsens your reflux. So you've got to look at the underlying cause, otherwise true health will never really be achieved. Look, hats off to the pharmaceutical industry. They have done so well at conditioning us to believe that the only way that we can maintain health is by popping their pill, when it's really not true. What the pills do is they suppress a symptom. They don't actually ever, not one pharmaceutical medication ever promotes healing within the body. All right, so it's really important. If you want to get your reflux right or your digestive health right, you have to look at the underlying causes and address them rather than putting a Band-Aid on the symptoms. Sure, the Band-Aid is helpful while you're addressing the underlying causes, but there's a lot of natural medicine, a lot of herbs, a lot of vitamins, a lot of minerals that can also improve stomach health. Another group of pharmaceutical medication that really plays havoc with the digestive system are antibiotics. Now, an antibiotic is designed to kill bacteria, and that can do it quite effectively. But if we remember the microbiome that we spoke about earlier on, the microbiome is about 2 kilo of organisms living within the gut, and they are predominantly about 98% bacteria. People that have taken antibiotics may have experienced some of the symptoms of diarrhea or abdominal pain, bloating, flatulence. When that occurs, what is actually happening is that the antibiotics are actually damaging or destroying our beneficial gut flora, our beneficial gut bacteria, aka our microbiome. And remember that if our microbiome gets sick, we get sick. If we get sick, they get sick. If they die, we die. If we die, they die. I think I've got all that right. So it's really, really important. Now, antibiotics do serve a purpose in life-threatening situations, but a lot of times they have been over-dispensed to the detriment of our long-term health. Another class of pharmaceutical medication that damage the digestive tract is non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. They're the sort of drugs like aspirin, Mobic, Vioxx, Celebrex, and what they do is that they actually inhibit the body's collagen protein synthesis, so the body's ability to produce more collagen, which is no good if you're taking it because you've got arthritis and your body needs to produce more collagen and cartilage. So, but I digress. Sorry about that. In the gut, there's what we call tight gut junction proteins, and they join the cells of the intestines together. Picture a brick wall, and the brick wall is all the bricks are joined in the wall by mortar or bits of cement. If that cement dissolves or there's a hole that occurs in that cement, that allows dirt, dust, spiders, cobwebs, wasps, ants, anything to pass through that wall into the wall cavity. Well, it's the same thing within the digestive tract. Those medications, along with antibiotics, dissolve that tight gut junction, the mortar, the cement that keeps the cells stuck together, and then that allows undigested food, bacteria byproducts, poisons, and even in severe cases feces to pass into the bloodstream. Then the liver gets it, the liver dumps it back into the intestinal tract, and then it goes around and around and around until the liver goes, bugger this, and it then starts to put it into fat-soluble tissues such as brain, or if we're overweight, our fat to render it harmless. If it goes to the brain, that's, as you can imagine, not a good thing. When the tight gut junctions are dissolved, it's leaky gut. I can't remember if I just mentioned leaky gut, but it's called leaky gut syndrome or intestinal permeability. That then, they also damage the villi. So the villi are what absorb the nutrients into the bloodstream. So we want the nutrients broken down. We don't want them to pass into the bloodstream as a large particle. Otherwise, that sets off an allergenic response within the body. So you might have eaten a banana and you're not allergic to bananas, but because the banana should be broken down to, say, 8 peptides, 8 little links, and those 8 little links, if you think of a chain, those 8 little links are then absorbed through the villi and they go into the bloodstream, and the liver goes, oh, you're a banana, off you go. And the immune system says, yep, you're all good, you're a banana, off you go, do what you're supposed to do in the body. But if it's 16 links because the villi is not absorbing, or it hasn't been broken down properly, and it passes through the leaky gut, those little holes that have appeared in the gut wall, then the body goes, yeah, I don't know what you are, attack, and that's an allergy. So we've got to be mindful of that scenario also. I know I digressed a little bit there from digestive health. Just as things come to me, they've kind of come out of my mouth. I apologise about that. So the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs that I mentioned, it's the class of drugs, and the antibiotics destroy the lining of the intestines. When you destroy the lining of the intestines, the home for the immune system looks pretty crappy. As you want a nice, healthy, beautiful looking room. You don't want room with all holes in it everywhere, and then stuff leaking in and out of your room that shouldn't be there. Other common causes of poor digestion are dysbiosis. So dysbiosis is an overgrowth of harmful gut organisms, and so there's an overgrowth of those in relation to the amount of good guys. So that can cause things like bloating, gas, constipation, abdominal pain, diarrhea, but a whole heap of mental health problems. Within the gut, there's a nervous system called the enteric nervous system, and it's the second biggest nervous system in the whole body. And just think of the lining of the gut with all of these little nerve heads sticking out, and what they're doing is they're sampling everything that goes on in the whole digestive tract. And within 1/1,000,000th of a second, that message is sent back to the brain to say, hey, mate, upregulate this, stop doing that, we need a bit more of this, bring this on, stop, move around, do a 360, stand on your head, spin around, all that sort of stuff. So the brain is obviously the supercomputer, and it's orchestrating everything that happens within the gut. Now, if everything's nice and healthy down there, that information comes to the brain, and the brain goes, oh, this is pretty cool, I can handle all that. But just imagine if that information that came back to the brain was toxic because of your diet or because of an overgrowth of bad guys. It would just freak the brain out. Now the brain's going, oh, hang on, that's not the right information, and it gets confused. And when it gets confused, then you can get your depression, your anxiety, etc., etc. Now, obviously, I'm going to go. This is a massive topic, and I'm not going to go into it in any great detail now. Because I've digressed yet again, but I will definitely do this when I talk about this, when I speak about anxiety and depression and other mental health problems. So going back to dysbiosis, so if there's an overgrowth of baddies, then that causes that those baddies can be overgrown in the small intestine, and that's a thing called SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or in the colon, and that's dysbiosis. Now that can inhibit in the colon the body from producing all the vitamins that I mentioned earlier on that is produced in the gut, or it can upset the microbiome. If it's in the small intestine, it can upset the absorption of nutrients through the small intestine. So I'll tell you how to get rid of it a little later. So it's not difficult, but very, very important. It's just like when we worm our pets, we're going to have to worm ourselves. Another major cause of digestive disharmony is stress. Now, when we get stressed, stress does a lot of things in the body. Again, a massive topic, but I'm just going to pick out a few important things and what it does to the digestive system. So stress inhibits the stomach from producing stomach acid. Yeah, we're in trouble already. Stress also allows the harmful bacteria or the parasites within the gut to adhere to the gut wall. That then creates inflammation that can lead to leaky gut syndrome, that can then inhibit those bad guys from being eliminated when we do a poo. When the body's stressed, our flight-fight response is activated, which basically means we're going to fight someone or we're going to run away. When our body's under stress, the flight-fight response is activated. And when that's activated, it shuts down all what it deems non-essential operations within the body, and the digestive system is one of the main ones it stops. So basically it shunts blood away from the digestive system and brings it into the muscles, so we can have more strength. So we can either fight somebody or we can run away. That's the fight-flight response. It also improves our hearing, our senses, and our coordination, etc. That means all of our pancreatic enzymes, our digestive juices, our stomach acids, our ability for the poo to travel down through the colon, all of that is stopped. Once that's stopped, obviously we don't absorb nutrients out of the food because that process is deemed non-essential at that point in time. Now that's okay if you're having a short-term stress, but if we're in long-term stress and we're always stressed out, we're always rushing around, that means stress is going to be playing a major detrimental role in that long-term health of our digestive function. Okay, so we've got a better understanding of what the digestive organs are and how they work. We've looked at the signs and symptoms of poor digestive health. We've looked at some of the major causes of poor digestion. So let's get down and funky. God knows where that came from. Let's just look at what we can do to improve or dramatically improve digestive health. Okay, sitting at the top of the hit parade today is diet. You knew that anyway, didn't you? The importance of diet, I've already spoken a lot about diet and I won't go into it in too much more detail, but try as much as humanly possible to start eating a diet rich in fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes, pulses, beans, free-range cows or grass-fed cows, chickens, eggs, oysters, prawns, and minimize the amounts of man-made or synthetic foods such as like cakes, biscuits, chocolates, chips, lollies, soft drinks, pre-made foods, white flour products, synthetic meat products, anything along those lines. Just minimize them because they are not good for your long-term health. Sure, we all love a piece of chocolate. We all love a glass of wine or a beer. And there's nothing wrong with that sort of stuff in moderation. It's when, you're drinking 6 beers a day, or you're having a bottle of wine at night, or you're having, white sandwiches. Look, here's a classic example of a bad diet for people. Now, actually, I haven't even mentioned this. I will. Sorry, I'm digressing here. I'm talking in my head as I'm talking to you. So just bear with me. I'll breathe and we'll get it out. So let's just look at a typical breakfast, typical Aussie breakfast. Wheat Bix for breakfast, so Vitabrits Wheat Bix. Then we might have some toast for breakfast. We'll have a sandwich for lunch. We might have a Tim Tam or a biscuit for morning tea. We might have pasta at dinner or a piece of bread with dinner. We might have a bit of biscuit or cake for dessert, or a pudding for dessert. When we have a meal like that, it's a very nutrient-dead daily meal plan. But what it's very high in is it's high in gluten. Now, this is where I was mumbling before. I thought, I haven't even mentioned gluten. So this is what I'm going to have a bit of a mention about gluten. So gluten, it always gets a bad rap, and it gets a bad rap because of the diet that I've just told you about. It's everything that I just mentioned then, whether it be the breakfast, the lunch, the dinner, or the snacks throughout the day, were all based on gluten. Now, gluten is a very hard molecule to break down. So think of it as a grain of sand. It's going to be like that to the digestive system, and especially if the digestive system's weak. When we have a lot of gluten every single day, it's that little one grain of sand, it joins a piece of paper and it becomes like sandpaper. So if you get a piece of sandpaper and rub that on the inside of your arm, couple of times. It's going to hurt, isn't it? Who the hell would do that? What are you a fool, Greg? But if you can imagine doing that, that's going to cause, you're going to break the skin, and that's going to cause a lot of irritation, rash, gravel rash, that sort of stuff on the skin. Well, that gluten does the same thing to the intestines, and then that causes inflammation, which causes pain, which causes irritation down there in the intestines, which can cause bloating, which can cause gas, all of those type of things, diarrhea, because you've irritated the lining of the intestines so severely. The damage caused to the intestines can lead to leaky gut syndrome, which is the microscopic holes that appear in the gut wall. It can impede our immune function because there's a lot of inflammation down there, and obviously the good bacteria, the good guys, the microbiome, they don't want to live in an inflamed environment. So then that can decline our immune health. It can lead to autoimmune disease, allergies that we've mentioned previously. So the take-home message is minimize the gluten. What we need is lots of fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds, as I've already mentioned, so I'm not going to go back over that same rigmarole again. So diet, very, very important, as it forms the basis of long-term health, not just for the digestive system, but for the whole body. Oh, before we move on to the next topic, I've just remembered there's one very important food group that's going to be very beneficial for the digestive system, and that is bitters, bitter food. Bitter foods stimulate the production of saliva, which, as I've mentioned previously, stimulates the stomach to produce more stomach acids and has a toning effect across the whole digestive system. Some really good bitter foods that you can easily purchase at your local greengrocer or supermarket are dandelion greens. Actually, you can dig them out of your front lawn if you know what they are. Artichoke, radicchio lettuce, that's the red bitter lettuce, rocket, chicory, endive. There's a melon called bitter melon that has a lot of medicinal properties, but it's bitter, so it'll stimulate digestion as well. Ginger and turmeric. Okay, so now we can move on to the next topic to help improve digestion, and that would be stress management is also going to be paramount for digestive health. So get into the habit of checking in with yourself and seeing, am I stressed? Or ask your family, am I stressed? Oh yeah, you're a pain in the bum. Yeah, okay, righto. But if you find yourself always irritated, agitated, angry, moody, depressed, anxious, that's your body in a stressed out state, or you feel overwhelmed, you just can't cope with everything, you're rushing around like a blue-ass fly, that's all your indications that your body is not coping with stress effectively, as can be poor sleep. So if you go to bed and you can't fall asleep and you can't stay asleep, that's also another sign of stress. That being the case, things that can help, that you can easily do that can help downregulate stress is exercise, movement, anything along those lines. Deep breathing. Breathe in through your nose, hold it. Breathe out through your nose. If you find that when you're breathing, you also feel agitated, breathe in the word calm and breathe out the word anxious, irritated, moody, whatever it is, and you'll notice a big difference within 2 or 3 breaths. Yoga, Tai Chi, meditation, they're all very good at helping to calm the body down, as is doing things that you love. Do things that you enjoy. If you enjoy collecting stamps, make sure you collect stamps. If you enjoy cooking, cook. Now, I digress here with a little bit of cooking because it's going to lead into diet. If you make some cakes or biscuits, the vibrational energy of the cakes or biscuits that you make are far superior to anything that you get in a supermarket. They actually have one key ingredient that the supermarket or the store-bought items don't have, and that is love. Now that might sound strange, but when you make something for someone, you put your essence, your energy into that food. That then, within itself, just that essence, that energy, creates a lot of harmony within the gut. Sorry, digressed again. Oh, this stuff that just pops into my head. Going back to the Tai Chi and yoga, there is some really good poses, I suppose you'd call them, that actually tone and strengthen the digestive system. So if you can join a yoga or a Tai Chi class and learn some of those moves, that's going to be fantastic because it's also going to reduce the stress, but it's going to improve the function of the digestive tract itself. Okay, so let's look at some of the more specific organs of the digestive system and what can be done to help improve their overall health. Starting with the stomach, we have a fair few conditions that can upset the stomach. So I mentioned earlier on reflux and heartburn. I suppose that's a good place to start. There can be multiple causes of reflux and heartburn. It could be something as simple as that you're eating a food that your body doesn't agree with, your stomach doesn't agree with, and that can then cause that regurgitation of the acid back up through the esophagus. So just be mindful, if it's every time I have wheat I get reflux, well, you've got to cut the wheat out. But if your reflux is caused by the sphincter valve not closing properly, there's some fantastic herbs to retighten and reinvigorate that sphincter valve, and that sphincter valve is the valve that joins the esophagus to the stomach. So if that's not closing properly, if it's slightly open, you're going to have the reflux running back up through there, especially when you're lying down at night. So there's some fantastic herbs that will help with that. Golden seal is very, very good at helping to strengthen that sphincter valve, as is chamomile. Chamomile and golden seal combination have been shown to dramatically reduce the symptoms of reflux. So I often tell patients, if you feel like you've got a bit of reflux or heartburn coming along, have a cup of chamomile tea, and they all go, "Oh my God, that works so well. I really like it." With that, I throw a bit of marshmallow in if I was making up a herbal tonic. Not the pink and white fluffy ones, but the root of the marshmallow plant. And a herb that is synonymous with stomach health, and that is meadowsweet. So meadowsweet helps to reduce stomach inflammation. It's an astringent, so it tightens up secretions within the stomach. It's what herbalists would call a tonic specifically for the stomach. If the reflux is caused by the H. pylori bacteria I mentioned earlier on, there's good strategies to eliminate that don't rely on the pharmaceutical antibiotics. I generally give patients a tonic with a combination of sage, olive, golden seal, garlic and turmeric, along with the special probiotic Saccharomyces boulardii, and that probiotic crowds out the bacteria in the stomach, while the herbs come in there and they just beat the hell out of it and knock it into next century. If a person suffers from ulcers, there's a couple of things we need to look at. Obviously, what causes the ulcers? It can be stress, it can be H. pylori. We need to regenerate that mucus layer. There's a mucus layer that separates the stomach acid from the surface of the stomach. And if that layer of mucus breaks down, then you're going to be more prone to burning. You can just imagine putting acid onto some tender skin, it's going to burn. So I'm not saying to do this, but if you've ever spilt pool acid on yourself, you will know it hurts, and that's hydrochloric acid. So slippery elm, good old slippery elm, helps soothe and coat the intestinal tract, and including the stomach, as does marshmallow. And then the amino acid glutamine will help regenerate the damage that's caused, or that has been caused by the ulcer. If you suffer from poor digestion, like poor stomach digestion, so you're getting a lot of bloating and burping, a couple of hours after eating food, you still feel full in the stomach, or you've got a lot of gas out the back end, that generally indicates that the stomach is low in stomach acid and low in digestive enzymes. You can take a supplement called betadine hydrochloride, and that is the precursor to hydrochloric acid. The stomach uses that as hydrochloric acid, and that may help in the short term, but I've never been a big fan of that, because that means you then become reliant on that type of medication or that type of nutritional supplement for the long-term production of stomach acid. I prefer to use herbs that will regenerate the stomach's ability to produce the acid and various stomach secretions. This way, maybe after 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months of taking these herbs, the body or the stomach has regenerated itself enough then not to need to worry about any other supplementation or any other pharmaceutical medication to try to balance out its secretions, which is always a good thing. We want to get the body back to its optimal health. So there's one class of herbs that work really, really well on improving the stomach acid production by firstly stimulating the saliva production in the mouth, and then stimulating and regenerating the cells that produce the various gastric juices, and they're called bitter herbs. Now, these bitter herbs include dandelion root, dandelion leaf, ginger, So it's a warming bitter, obviously. Ginger is quite warming. Gentian, it's a cooling bitter. Candy Tough, also known as Herberus. Chamomile. Chamomile does everything. You'll learn over these podcasts that I'll be mentioning chamomile quite a lot. Good old meadowsweet is back in there. And then you've got some culinary herbs like fennel or turmeric. They're also going to help improve stomach production. Remembering that zinc, vitamin B1, B6, B3 are all important, as actually well as the amino acid histidine, are all very important or play very important roles in being the ingredients that the stomach needs to produce these stomach acids or these gastric secretions. If we move on to the next organ downstream, which will be the pancreas, to increase the pancreatic enzymes, the enzymes that break the food down in the small intestine, you can take digestive enzymes, but it's the same as taking the betadine hydrochloride for the stomach. You're not actually stimulating the body, or in this case, the pancreas, to produce the enzymes by itself. You're actually giving the enzymes to help break the food down. The pancreas goes, yeah, I'm going back to bed. I don't think I'll come to work today. I'm going to have a bludge. Everyone else is doing my job for me. What we really want is our pancreas to be working for us without any nutritional supplementation. So how can we do that? Well, some of the herbs I've just mentioned that were really good for the stomach are equally as good for the pancreas in stimulating the enzyme production. So dandelion, root and leaf, very good. It's a bitter herb. So bitter herbs will stimulate stomach acid and pancreatic enzymes. Gentian, it's basically the king of the bitters for the gut. Add to that golden seal and throw into that mix quite possibly ginger, turmeric, chamomile and candy tough bitter. Not to be outdone, there is some really good fruits that actually will help improve digestion, in particular digestive enzymes. So pineapple is really good. It contains a chemical called bromelain. Bromelain is anti-inflammatory. It is also an enzyme that will help break down food. And the highest concentration of bromelain is actually in the leaves, so I don't recommend eating the leaves. But the core itself has good levels of bromelain and lesser extent in the flesh, but still it does contain bromelain. The other one is pawpaw or papaya. It contains an enzyme called papain, which tenderizes meat, which they can use to tenderize meat, but it actually starts to denature the meat in the stomach and small intestines. So it breaks it down. Moving on to the intestines, we'll look at the colon and the small intestine, and we'll basically look at them together because they're very similar. They do different jobs, but to fix them and to heal them, the treatment strategies are quite similar. In clinic, when I have a patient that needs digestive help, and they're bloated, they're gassy, and they're constipated, or they're diarrhea, if I haven't told them to drink more water for the constipation, I basically go in and start treating dysbiosis initially. And the reason for that is that when you've got dysbiosis is an overgrowth of harmful organisms and a reduction of your good bacteria, your microbiome. As we mentioned earlier, dysbiosis causes the breakdown of the lining of the intestine, so it leads to leaky gut syndrome. It can be a common cause of irritable bowel disease or irritable bowel syndrome, either in the colon or the small intestine. If it's in the small intestine, it's commonly known as SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and that is a pretty sterile environment, actually, the small intestines. There's not, predominantly the majority of the bacteria found in the intestines is in the colon, not necessarily in the small intestine. So if you have an overgrowth of harmful organisms there, then they can, the food will come into the small intestine, and those bacteria, the organisms that shouldn't be there, will start to ferment the food in the small intestine. That's then going to cause all of your irritable bowel syndrome symptoms, which is your bloating, your gas, your constipation, your diarrhea, your abdominal pain, just feeling bloated and full every time that you eat. In the colon, it causes something different as well, but obviously it's a bit lower down. It's going to be causing more of the pain and the discomfort in the lower parts of the abdomen. In addition to that, the dysbiosis also impedes immune function. So because 70% of the immune system lives in the gut, it can cause cardiovascular problems. It will upset mental health. It will exacerbate mental health conditions. So it's a pretty good place to start. So what we generally do is in clinic we'll give probiotics. I generally give two different types of probiotics. I'll give a combination of probiotics that contain the Acidophilus species and a Bifidobacterium species, and I will give another strain of probiotic which is the Saccharomyces boulardii. And the reason for the two of them is that the Bifidobacterium and the Acidophilus, they get into the small intestines. They get into the intestines and they rev up all of the good guys, and it's like they're party animals. They get down there and they're tooting away and they're going, woohoo, let's go, and everyone feels good while they're around them. So it upregulates the health of the beneficial bacteria. But they only live in the gut for about 3 to 4 to 6 weeks, and then they're shunted out. The Saccharomyces, it stays in the gut even less. It's about 3 days later. After supplementation, it's gone. But when it's there, it crowds out and smothers the harmful bacteria and parasites and fungal spores such as Candida. And as it dies, so it kills them, it increases what we call secretory IgA, which is in the gut, which is a very important immune modulating component of the gut-based immune system. It also, as it dies, it's broken down to prebiotic fiber, and that increases butyrate. So when we spoke earlier on with the prebiotics, butyrate feeds the masses. So those two are very important to help bring the ecology of the beneficial bacteria back into balance. But sometimes they're not strong enough, and we need to get in there with specific antimicrobial herbs that will either kill viruses, worms, parasites, or fungal spores. Really good herbs that help kick the baddies into the next dimension, or the life on the other side, are things like barberry. It contains berberine, similar chemical, or same chemical that's also found in golden seal. So golden seal is also beneficial not only for the stomach, but also to kill harmful organisms. Cloves, calendula, Pau is a great antifungal. Black walnut kills worms. Aniseed tastes great, reminds me of black jelly beans. Yeah, well, I digress yet again. Wormwood and sweet wormwood, two types of wormwood. They actually, obviously, as their name suggests, they do kill worms and other harmful bacteria. Some great culinary herbs that will help reduce dysbiosis are rosemary, garlic, and thyme. Generally, people would need to do the dysbiosis treatment for around 2 weeks. Some people may be 4 weeks if they've got very bad symptoms. But after that, we then need to start to heal the gut wall. So we need to repair things like leaky gut syndrome, reduce gut inflammation, enhance the health of all the additional bacteria in the microbiome. And we do that with various amino acids and vitamins, minerals, and herbs. So some really good herbs would be slippery elm, as I mentioned earlier, and marshmallow. They are both what we call demucilin herbs. They coat and soothe the lining of the intestines, which will then help to reduce inflammation. When we reduce inflammation within the intestines, that stops intestinal cells from further deterioration. Within the intestines are cells called enterocytes and colonocytes. Now, the enterocytes play a major role in keeping the tight gap junctions functioning properly. So if you have a lack of enterocytes, the tight gap junctions, the things that keep all the cells together, deteriorate, and then leaky gut occurs. So the amino acid glutamine is very important in nourishing and revitalising the health of the enterocytes, thus healing any leaky gut or intestinal permeability. In addition to help with wound healing, vitamin A, vitamin D, and vitamin E play very important roles, especially within the gut. Now, the colonocytes shape the health of the microbiome. So the healthier the colonocytes are, the healthier our microbiome is. Now, this is really important. Now, I mentioned earlier on that prebiotic fibers play very important roles in stimulating and maintaining the health of the microbiome. Now, I think I mentioned earlier, if I didn't, I'm about to mention it now. I can't remember what I said. It's been going over an hour. When we eat a prebiotic fibre, the commensal bacteria that are neither good nor bad, they eat the prebiotic fibers. Those prebiotic fibers are then turned into short chain fatty acids, and the most common short chain fatty acid for the for the intestines, I should say, is butyrate. And butyrate does the loaves and fishes. Actually, I do think I've mentioned this because I remember the loaves and fishes, where we feed multiple beneficial gut bacteria. But the other thing that the short chain fatty acids do is they actually supply the food and the nourishment for the colonocytes. So without the prebiotic fibers, the colonocytes can't, or they don't become very healthy. And as I think I mentioned, we can then suffer from things like polyps and cancers and all that within the intestines. So the colonocytes, the healthier the colonocytes, the healthier the beneficial bacteria, the microbiome. And that all comes down to prebiotic fibers. Now, you can get a lot of prebiotic fibers in onions and leeks and garlics and things like asparagus, Jerusalem artichokes and prickly pear or nopal cactus, the leaf, the inner leaf of well, not the outside leaf because it's as prickly as all hell. Take that off and that fleshy part in there, that's very high in prebiotics. Prickly pear is not a common food eaten in Australia, but it is quite common in Mexico. Another great prebiotic food is chicory root. And another good thing about chicory is that the leaves are bitter, so helps stimulate digestion. So within prebiotics, there's different types of prebiotic fibers. There is inulin, which is found in a lot of the vegetables I've just mentioned. Oligofructose, which can be found in nopal cactus. Breast milk actually has quite a good level of prebiotic fibers. Another one that you may find in supplements is arabinogalactans. There is mesquite, which is a bean from a pod from I think it's Africa, and that's very high in prebiotic fibers. There's another type of fiber that's not actually a prebiotic fiber. It's called a resistant starch, and that actually also does work similarly to a prebiotic fiber and stimulates the health of the cells within the colon and small intestine and the beneficial bacteria. And that is most commonly found in very starchy type foods, in particular green bananas. Have you ever eaten a banana that you thought was ripe, but because they've chemically ripened them with the ethylene, you get it and you open it and you think, oh, it looks nice and yellow. When you bite into it, and it's hard and it's like, and you feel this powdery stuff on your teeth, that's the starch. So actually those bananas are very good for your gut health. If we look at the liver, now that's a topic all on its own. We're just going to touch on it, and we're going to touch on it in regards to the bile production. So thankfully, Mother Nature is always on the ball, and she has given us a whole heap of herbs and nutrients that actually stimulate the liver to produce more bile and stimulate the gallbladder to secrete the bile. To increase the bile flow and production from the gallbladder, specific herbs such as barberry, cloves, which is also an antimicrobial herb, dandelion, which is also a herb to improve stomach and digestive enzymes, gentian, again, back for the bitters, globe artichoke, which is a wonderful tasting vegetable, peppermint, yellow dock. Those type of herbs are really important to help improve gallbladder function. So some of the herbs that help improve the bile flow from the gallbladder actually also help improve the bile flow from the liver, and they are barberry, globe artichoke, and dandelion. Other herbs including St. Mary's thistle, andrographis, golden seal, and turmeric also help improve bile flow from the liver. You've now been listening to this podcast for well over an hour, so thank you and well done. You've got the patience of a saint. There's most probably more things that I could have mentioned and spoken about with the digestive system, but as you can understand from what we've spoken about, it is big, and I will in future podcasts look at different aspects of the digestive function in more detail and give you a greater understanding. So if you want a bit more information on some of the herbs or supplements or vitamins or minerals, etc., that I've mentioned throughout this podcast, either click on the links below this podcast and that will take you to web pages for more information. Alternatively, if the links aren't visible because of your feed, go to vitalityandwellness.com.au and just click on the NatraVital range, whether it be the NatraVital supplements, the NatraVital herbal tonics, the herbal blends, the single herbs, the health packs. There's a lot of information in there that can help improve digestion and digestive health. There's also some information for our furry little friends on how to improve their digestive health under the NatraVital for Pets range. Now, I've got to put this in here, the legal side of things. Any information that I've given you today is purely educational and not meant to diagnose, treat, or cure any disease. Please consult your healthcare professional before taking any treatment to improve digestive health. Before you go, and you're almost there, please subscribe or follow us so you can be kept abreast of the next enthralling, exciting, fantastic episode in our Time for Health podcast series. Until next time, this is Greg Newson. Live life and laugh loud.